Well, after a crazy game like that, we had to reach back out to our friends from Houston, Pawd Slama Jama, and Andy has been kind enough to join us tonight to kind of discuss the turn of events that happened on Saturday. And so we're just going to go through parts of the game with him. First off, Andy, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing good. How are you guys?
I mean, we're doing
Saturday night.
Yeah, doing good. Still kind of riding that high. It was a really fun night, but yeah, let's kind of get your thoughts on your side of things. So just kind of wanted to start first half, not go through it, dissect it, but obviously it was the first half where Texas Tech kind of was in control. We're leading 17-3 at the end of it. We have a couple of big play touchdowns to kind of give us that separation. How are you feeling at the end of the first half, and as we headed into the second half, where was your head at in this game?
Oh man, at the end of the first half, obviously all the attention had to turn to the struggles for the Houston Cougars on offense, and I mentioned the offense. I'll start with them just because they couldn't muster up more than just 3 points at halftime, and they were really struggling to move the ball, to get any drives going. There was oftentimes I think they had 8 or 7 drives in that first half. 3 of them were punts. One of them was a fumble loss.
Yeah.
Another, I can't remember if it was a turnover and downs or something. And then the last one, the time expired on the half. So they really struggled to get anything going. And I think on the field goal, it might have even been set up by the defense. If I'm not mistaken.
I think that was a punt return by Tank Dell.
By Tank. There we go. Correct. He returned it to about the 19-yard line, and they couldn't punch it into the end zone, which it's something that Dana Holgorsen mentioned today during his I guess his recap of Texas Tech looking ahead at Kansas. And he said that their inability to score in the red zone is something that really cost Houston. But then I guess focusing on a defensive perspective, I guess I'll get into it if you want to discuss the second half. But that was my overall takeaways from the first half. And let me tell you, the Houston fans were not happy at halftime. And it really kind of brought a lot of the concerns that were being said about the program at the beginning of last season before they went on that 11-game winning streak. And really, I guess the biggest thing that fans were pointing out is that Houston just flat out didn't look prepared to start the game.
Yeah, so first half 17-3, we're feeling great. Houston Cougars, not so much. This is kind of similar to last year's game, just flip-flopped, where
exactly
dominated first half, and then now it's totally flip-flopped, and then Houston comes out second half. They get a great pass rush on Donovan Smith. They're giving him fits all night, and take us through that second half, and especially the fourth quarter's up and downs, and making the comeback and finally taking a lead at the end with a minute left.
No, yeah, absolutely. And what I was going to say, so focusing on a defensive perspective for Houston, they played about as good of a game you could for 3 quarters and like 0.8% of the game, where they had the 2 big chunk plays where Texas Tech scored. I think it was a 43-yard and the 54-yard touchdowns where, again, they just had these random lapses where once opposing teams can get into Houston secondary, where it just seems like they forget how to tackle at times.
Tackle each other on this.
That was Hassan Hippolyte and I believe it was Javarius. No, it wasn't Owens. It was Jace Rogers. Those were the 2 players that collided, Hassan Hippolyte and Jace Rogers. And when that obviously it resulted in a touchdown for you guys, that kind of seemed to be insult.
We all thought he was going to try to go out of bounds.
That would have been something.
And then all of a sudden he has a wide open path.
Honestly, looking at the 2 players that collided with each other, that was kind of a summary of that first half for Houston and how that went. It just seems like they couldn't get out of their own way. In more ways than one. But then outside of those 2 plays where they were the long touchdowns, the defense played about as phenomenal as they could be. And oh my God, Derek Parrish absolutely dominated you guys.
Don't want to hear that name for a while.
And, well, you're lucky he's a senior. You're not going to see him once Houston gets into the Big 12. And he was playing with a cast on his right hand. So he was basically playing one-handed, 4.5 sacks. 6.5 tackles for loss. I think he had 11 total tackles, which is just absurd. So no surprise he was named the American Athletic Conference Defensive Player of the Week. And I think he broke the American Athletic Conference record for sacks and tackle for losses in a game. And it kind of interesting because after post game, they asked Dana Holgorsen about him. And I think he was ticked off about the loss, but they asked him about Parrish specifically. And he mentioned his performance. He said, not good enough post game. But I think he meant overall of the defense, perspective. And then he was asked about Parrish again on Monday, and he said that that's one of the most dominant performances that he has ever seen from any player. And he went on to mention a whole bunch of lists of players that he's been able to coach in the past, and that ranks as number one for Holgorsen. So absolutely, Parrish was a monster, and he was a one-man wrecking crew. And something else that Holgorsen said is that on that last play, I guess I'll jump into overtime, where Donovan Smith was able to run it in for the touchdown. Parrish was actually mad because he said he slipped and he felt that he could have made a play on Smith on that play. And because he slipped, he felt that he had kind of let that play go. And then obviously, of course, Texas Tech won. I guess we'll get into the overtime period since that was the final play of the game. But obviously, of course, Houston, they got the touchdown. They were up and they got you guys until 4th and 20 in that overtime period. And again, Holgorsen said that was a botch coverage, that it was a breakdown in coverage because the safeties were playing too deep. I guess they were they were playing to try to avoid, the Hail Mary into the end zone, but the problem was they left the sticks wide open. So Donovan Smith passed it down, and they were able to get a 4th and 20. They just got the gain of 21. And then obviously, of course, I think the other theme for Houston throughout the night was penalties. Too many dumb penalties, especially early on, where for the second straight week, Tank Dell had a punt return called off because of a penalty, and this one there's no bad call. That's something they mentioned after the UTSA game, that the refs were like, that probably wasn't a block in the back or holding. No, this one absolutely was a terrible call, roughing the kicker on that punt that had nothing to do with Tank's return. And then even then, a couple of times, there was one drive where they gave Texas Tech like 2 extra first downs after getting them on 4th down for dumb mistakes. And that's something that Dana Holgorsen said, that at the end of the day, and post game, he said they just did too much stupid crap for them to be able to win the game. Those were along the line, something about those comments where, quite frankly, said that Houston didn't deserve to win just because they made way too many mistakes. And I guess you could, if you're looking at the silver lining from the Houston perspective, they were in position to win the game. Obviously, they weren't able to hang on, but God, they just couldn't get out of their own way at the end of the day, and too many mistakes that they couldn't overcome.
Yeah, I know for us, when we had that 4th and 20, we were ready to pack up and leave. We thought that was the last play. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
He's like wide open. He easily had 10 more yards to run, so it was an easy get of a first down.
Wow.
So what was going through your head I know we kind of skipped around to the overtimes and stuff, but what was going through your head there at the end of the fourth quarter? Because, it had been kind of a defensive showing out, like both teams, y'all get the pick 6 to tie, y'all's offense can't move the ball. We get the ball back, and the worst call of the day for us is we decide to try to heave a pass down on like 3rd and 15 from our own end zone. It gets picked, and y'all are already in field goal range with like a minute to go. Y'all don't really waste any time, get the field goal, and we get it the 37 seconds left and go down to tie. So what's kind of going through your head during all of that going on right there in the last couple of minutes?
Yeah, I think once again it kind of goes to the early theme for Houston in these 2 games, and that's inconsistency and the inability to close. Really, because it was literally the exact same.
Right.
If the defense was able to hang on, it would have literally been the exact opposite script of of last season's game with you guys, because the defense would have shut you guys out the entire second half, and Houston would have been able to win, which would have been pretty interesting. That's how the game would have played out. But instead, like you said, 37 seconds. I think you guys did. You guys have one timeout or 2 timeouts?
I think we used 2 timeouts on you guys. Y'all ran the ball twice on that field goal kick possession, and y'all threw the ball and had an incomplete pass. So we had one timeout left in the bag.
Yeah, and you guys obviously, of course, were able to drive down the field, but I think that's probably the main thing right there, that inconsistency across the board, and it's honestly, it's kind of a shame because of how dominant the defense was, especially up front, especially, again, I'm gonna say the name again, especially with Parrish, and like you said, being able to make those plays, like Houston was able to get 3 interceptions off of Donovan Smith, like you mentioned. The pick 6 that tied the game, that was huge, and it would have been very, very good for Houston. Obviously, of course, had they won, comeback home opener against Kansas, 2-0 versus 2-0, there would have been a lot more buzz around the program, and instead they lost. And really, it kind of, obviously from fan bases, they're going to be overreaction the moment the game ends, but I feel like it sucked the air out of the fan base a little bit, with just the momentum that they had. Had they been able to be 2-0, especially 2 games where, to be quite frank, the offense hasn't really been good, and for probably, I was going to say, they've played 8 quarters plus the 5 overtime periods. The offense probably hasn't been good for 8 quarters, and they've really showed out probably for 5 of those overtime periods when it seems like the offense kind of can make stuff going. But it would have been something to build on, and instead it's kind of like, well, we're unranked.
Right.
We might not even be the top team to be able to get that New Year's Six bowl anymore, after what some of the other teams were able to do in Notre Dame and just across the stone's throw at College Station. So
yeah,
it really sucked the air out of the fan base. But the Kansas.
Yep.
Kansas.
So
hey, I wanted to ask you your thoughts and Coach Holgerson's thoughts on Clayton Tune's game. Just 51% completion, 260 yards, 1-1. We thought in the stadium like he was really inconsistent, missed a lot of throws and overthrows, and just wanted to hear your thoughts and if Coach had anything to say about that.
Yeah, he didn't talk about Clayton Tune specifically, but he did talk about the offense overall. And again, I think the key thing that he mentioned, he went back to the offensive line and how inconsistency they have been, and when it comes to, and really he signaled them out, and when it comes to run block. He said that they haven't been able to push anyone during these first 2 games, which, kudos to Brandon Campbell, who had a pretty good game. He had 80 rushing yards. And then, well, of course, to Houston's luck, he ended up getting injured in that overtime. Yeah. I can't remember if it was in the first. It was in the first overtime period, because I guess Houston and Texas Tech took turns of trying to figure out a way to blow the game, because Houston was in a 2nd and 21, and that happened on the Campbell drive or rush, and that's how he got injured. But it just goes back to overall they've been inconsistent. And kudos to Texas Tech, because they really made Clayton Tune a non-factor in the ground game. He was recorded of having 6 rushing attempts, and he was recorded to have -2 rushing yards, which, a night and day difference of what he was able to do against UTSA, where he really hurt the Roadrunners with his legs. That was not the case against Texas Tech, and that's really where you saw that layer where there's a lot of change with Houston outside of Tank Dell, because Tank, he did what he was supposed to. He got over 100 yards, and outside of him, it's just like who else is going to step up? Because that there was a lot of talk during training camp about, different players, Matt Golden, Keyshawn Carter, a couple of others. And really it's been inconsistent from just the offense overall. So it's going to be something that they have to figure out. And literally the last comment that Holgerson made on Monday before he wrapped up his availabilities, he joked. He said, "I guess I just lost sight on how to coach offensive football." But then he just circled back and he said, that's something that you just got to keep working harder to figure out, because it does seem like they're kind of trying to figure out how to who's the next one outside of Tank Dell. And even from the rushing perspective, they lost Alton McCaskill to the ACL injury. So even in the backfield they're still trying to figure out new things. And Tajon Henry, he injured his ankle against UTSA. And then today Holgorsen said he injured his other ankle early on against you guys. So, God, he's had a brutal start to the season, and now that Brandon Campbell's injured, they're really looking thin up front. So you didn't rule either of them out for Kansas, but that's something to keep an eye on for Houston.
Yeah, it was interesting to watch Tune. I definitely think we had him really uncomfortable because there was, rewatching the game, there was definitely some plays where he had guys open and just for whatever reason overthrew them, or especially the last throw he had in the game, he has Tank Dell pretty much wide open over the middle, and he just misreads it, throws it to the outside guy who is covered, and it ends up being, an incomplete pass that forces the field goal for you guys. So I was curious what you thought about that, but just kind of your last thoughts on the game and what the Houston fan base is kind of feeling after. It was a tough loss. I mean, you battle back, feel like you have a chance to win it. We feel like we lost the game, and then all of a sudden we're winning the game. So it was a roller coaster of emotions. So just kind of take us through that.
No, yeah, absolutely. From a fan perspective, again, there's just a lot of frustration because there was a lot of heightened kind of importance added to this game. Obviously, of course, with Texas Tech and just the overall kind of the last few years, not being able to beat you guys. I think now it's a 5-game losing streak to the Red Raiders dating back to 2010, which is a bit absurd when you think about it. But then overall, this is something that they mentioned in the FS1 broadcast. Houston hasn't been able to beat a Big 12 team since 2016, which that's not what you want to hear.
Right.
You're going to join the Big 12
join the conference
on July 1, 2023. So now it's really going to be interesting because this is a Kansas team that they're hot. They got an impressive win going up to West Virginia and they put up 56 points on West Virginia. Their offense is legit. Their quarterback is legit. And Dana Holgorsen knows that he called it. It ain't your old Kansas team. These guys are pretty hot, and they're going to be looking to come in here and beat Houston for the upset, which that would really destroy the Houston fan base if they lose to Kansas in the home opener. But I think it puts a lot more added importance to that Kansas game because what Dana Holgorsen called it, he said these two games have been kind of our preview of the Big 12. And, something that Dayon and I have mentioned in our podcast in the past is like the athletics administration, they're not just satisfied with like getting into the Big 12, like their mindset, and something the UH president, Renu Couture, said on Thursday when they announced the naming rights extension to TDCU Stadium. Like their goal is to go into the Big 12 and compete to be, among the best in the conference. And, if they can't beat Texas Tech, and certainly if they can't beat Kansas, it's going to be a huge blow to just all the momentum overall. And to be quite frank, if they were to lose to both teams, honestly, it might not matter what they do during conference play. People would be like, well, okay, it's the American Athletic Conference. What are you going to do in the Big 12? You couldn't beat Kansas and Texas Tech. So it puts a lot more pressure on Houston to come out and play, not only win, but play well against Kansas in the home opener.
Right. Does the back-to-back road overtime games have any effect on maybe this next game or practice this week?
I don't think it'll affect their practice. I think their schedule will stay the same. But it certainly has to factor in when it comes to fatigue. I mean, it's something that Holgorsen mentioned. They lead all of college football in most periods played because they play 5 overtime periods, which is just brutal. And
not to mention it was hot. It was hot out here in Lubbock. Yeah, so
it's going down in that game.
Yeah.
I mean, we were struggling.
So chorus of booze every time someone would go down. And it's not going to get prettier at TDCU Stadium because unlike the Texans at NRG Stadium that has the retractable roof, TDCU Stadium does not. And this turf, it is turf. So it's going to be at 3 p.m. It's going to be a 3 p.m. kickoff. So that it is going to be hot.
It'll be a warm one. Yeah.
So, but I mean, it'll certainly play a factor, but I think that's just more the reason why there should be an emphasis on them trying to, get off to a good start early. But man, it's going to be interesting to see. I guess that's the key. Can they be consistent, especially from a defensive side? Because they've shown that they still have the talent to be a dominant defense. They showed it. They've shown it in both games. After they get into those holes, they kind of batch it down and stiffen up, and they don't they haven't let UTSA or Texas Tech run away and hide when they were up 14. So it's just about putting it together and figuring out something on offense. And I guess Brandon Campbell and Tajon Henry, they're going to be two big what ifs, because if for whatever reason they can't go, they're down to Stacey Sneed, and it's going to be they're already struggling to rush the ball. If they don't have their lead back, honestly, Brandon Campbell has easily been the best back for Houston it's still early, 2 games in, but if they can't produce a rushing game that isn't on Clayton Tune's legs, you saw that. They really struggled to create offense, and they did a better job getting the ball to Tank, but it can't just be Tank. They have to spread the wealth, and that's something that they haven't been able to figure out.
Well, before we get you out of here, you got any questions you got for us, or anything you're curious from inside the stadium, or anything like that?
Yeah, rushing the field after the game. What was that whole atmosphere like? Because I know
I'll take this one.
Yeah, go ahead, Dustin.
I'm actually good with it.
Yeah.
When I was a student, I got to be here for a lot of good teams and good games, and we rushed the field a lot, rushed the field in basketball a lot too. I think it was good because we haven't had a top 25 win in 3 years, and an in-state kind of rivalry starting up, and big game, and just how the emotions of that game went.
Oh, yeah.
And how we should have lost, tied it up, ended up winning it. Like, the emotions of that win, like, go for it. These students haven't got to have that feeling before, and neither have these players and this team. So I say go for it. I'm all for it, man.
Yeah, I didn't mind it. I thought the moment kind of called for it. Like, that's just a crazy game. That's kind of a once in a lifetime kind of game for some of these players, just to like you said, be down, feel like you're out of it, somehow pull it out. Like, so I don't know. Everybody was kind of going crazy, so didn't mind them rushing the field or anything like that. Especially because, like Dustin said, we don't have a lot of ranked wins at home to hold over our heads in the last several years. So it's really just a handful of those moments. So I'll take it when I can get it.
Important question now for y'all. Did you guys rush the field?
No, too old for that.
Too old for that. We did not. And that's okay. I got to rush the field a lot when I was a student. I'm okay with that. But I'm glad they got to experience that.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome for sure. Especially, they actually kept it on the TV broadcast a while, so you can certainly experience it
right.
From the TV perspective. It's always cool. And that's the best thing about college athletics, just being able to see the investment. And like you said, all the emotion when it comes to a game that was crazy and we probably seemed like he was drunk at times, the way the game played out, like you said, with getting into the Dover overtimes. But absolutely, it's awesome. And it certainly adds fuel to the rivalry, because even then, I can't remember if it was the official Texas Tech account or if it was the football one or whatever, but props to whoever oversees the social media department that posted the crushed Red Bull and said, "Welcome to the Big 12." That was a good tweet. Yeah. That was pretty good.
There's been some good shade kind of thrown for both sides. I think it's definitely one of those things that they're kind of leaning into this future, Big 12 relationship and the history that we have with our schools. So it's not like this new relationship or anything. We have history with each other, and we played each other a lot. So I like that we're kind of leaning into this. And like y'all have kind of talked about, we already kind of view this as one of those budding rivalries. So I enjoyed the social media aspect of it all.
Yeah, and it'll be much more interesting, because the next time these two teams do face, it'll be a conference game. So that's gonna be another added layer to it. Yep,
that'll be a new dimension to this whole series. So that we've enjoyed getting to chat with you the last couple of weeks. If y'all missed it, we hopped on with them to preview the game with Pawd Slama Jama on theirs. They got the whole interview on YouTube up on their channel, so you can go catch that if you want to. They're doing a lot of work there. So Andy, I'll give you a chance to shout out everything y'all are doing quick, and we'll get you out of here.
I appreciate it. So for sure, our podcast, that's Pawd Slama Jama, which I have mastered. We just launched a new YouTube channel, so we're kind of had to bud from the way we had it, but now we have our own YouTube channel, which I won't spell it out again, but it's Pawd Slama Jama on YouTube, obviously, of course, wherever you listen to your podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts as well for the audio only versions, and something else I'll plug in as well for anyone that's kind of at least would be interesting in the University of Houston perspective. But we also have the Let's Rage Cougs, which now officially owns Pawd Slama Jama. We do honestly kind of like an instant post-game show that streams on the Houston Round Ball Review YouTube channel, and honestly we give a forum to Houston fans to be able to kind of like what you see on radio shows where people can they actually can hop in if they choose and speak their mind and just talk about it and comment about it, which after this game there wasn't a lot of people that wanted to talk, which I found it interesting. I expected them to be more vocal after a loss like that, but they weren't. But I guess they just needed time to cool off because it actually ended up getting more views than the UTSA one in total overall. So I don't know, an interesting dynamic, but check that out on the Houston Round Ball Review YouTube channel. It streams the day after on Pawd Slama Jama as well on the Spotify and Apple platform. So it's been a privilege to be able to, like you said, we kind of did the home and home where we joined you guys in the summer just to talk overall. Obviously, of course, like you said, Houston's going to be joining the Big 12 in July of 2023, so it will probably be doing this much more often down the road.
Yeah, so if you're looking for some Houston friends over there to follow along with and see what they're up to, go give these guys a follow. They're on Twitter, and like you said, they're Apple and Spotify, so give them a listen. And once again, Andy, appreciate you taking the time out of your night to join us.
For sure. Thank you guys for having me.
Thanks, man.
No problem.